The Hobbit is J.R.R. Tolkien's predecessor series to The Lord of the Rings. It begins with Tolkien describing the Hobbit people and their way of life, specifically Bilbo Baggins, our main character. We learn that hobbits aren't known for being adventurous, so we find Bilbo sitting on his front porch when Gandalf the Grey, a well-known and respected wizard, goes to talk to him about having an adventure. Bilbo shoots down the offer, but Gandalf marks his house to be found by his coming guests. Later that evening, dwarves start showing up to his hobbit hole home. 13 arrive, their names Dwalin, Balin, Keely and Feely, Dori, Nori, Ori, Oin and Gloin, Bifur, Bofur, Bomber, and Thorin. The dwarves gather at his home because Gandalf has selected him as the 15th member of the expedition to get to the Lonely Mountain, which was the dwarves' domain before it was destroyed by Smaug, a terrible dragon that killed many dwarves and took over their mountain home. Bilbo is faced with a choice and decides to join them. When the company first enters the wilds, they encounter 3 trolls who attempt to eat them. Bilbo uses his wit and hobbit stealth to save the party. The troop then discovers the trolls' cave, where they find treasures and old elvish swords and armor, and it is at this point that Bilbo dons his famous sword Sting and his magnificent elvish chainmail. Next, they travel to Rivendell, home of Elrond, who is a leader in the elf community. From there, they travel through the mountains, where everyone falls into a goblin trap and ends up in an underground goblin city. During their escape, Bilbo falls into a hole and wakes up alone, where he finds the Ring of Power and meets Gollum. After finding out that the ring grants invisibility, Bilbo escapes to find the rest of the troop outside, debating how they will rescue him, if at all. Later that night, they are chased by goblins and their wolf allies, and are rescued by harpies, the giant eagles who patrol Middle-earth. The harpies then take the group to the edge of Mirkwood, a dense forest which they must traverse to get to the Lonely Mountain. There they meet the werebear Bjorn, who lets them rest and resupply for their journey. It is at this point Gandalf leaves the troop to attend other pressing business. While in Mirkwood, the band loses their supplies and, in a moment of desperation, leaves the path to chase what they think is the light of a feast. They become lost and eventually captured by giant spiders, with the exception of Bilbo. Once they escape the spiders, they are captured by elves, once again, not Bilbo. The Elf King will not let them leave, so Bilbo comes up with a plan to fit all the dwarves into a barrel raft and float down the river that leads to Lake Town, a human settlement from which the Elf King gets supplies. This plan works, and they escape the Elvish castle. After leaving Lake Town, they get to the Lonely Mountain and find a secret back door. Bilbo eventually gets inside and takes a piece of the treasure hoard, which makes Smaug unbelievably peeved. Smaug then goes on a rampage and begins destroying everything he can find, including Lake Town. Bard, a local leader at Lake Town, hears of the one weakness in Smaug's strong armor, which was discovered by Bilbo, and kills him. With Smaug dead, the humans and elves travel to the Lonely Mountain to claim the vast treasure. When they get there, they are denied access by Thorin. Bard argues that some of the wealth came from the human towns that were destroyed, and that the hospitality shown to Thorin's group should be repaid. Thorin tells Bard and the elves to leave, to which Bard replies that the mountain is now besieged until they get their fair share. Faced with war, Thorin's cousin Dane and more than 500 battle-ready dwarves march to Thorin's aid. All the while, the goblins and their wolf allies are plotting to make war on the dwarves. In the fight, Thorin, Feely, and Keely die. The armies do get out, and the goblins eventually lose, and the Battle of the Five Armies, as it comes to be known, is over. Dane becomes king under the mountain and gives the humans and elves their share of the treasure. With the adventure over with, Bilbo and Gandalf begin the long journey home. In the agreement with the dwarves and humans, Bilbo sacrifices his share, but is given silver and gold as payment for the journey. They arrive at Bilbo's home just in time to see the inhabitants of Hobbiton auctioning off all his property. For, being gone over a year, people assumed Bilbo was dead. In the very end, Bilbo is found enjoying his tea time with Gandalf and Balin, and the book comes to a pleasant end. A lesson to be learned from this story is that you shouldn't judge people based on your first impression of them. In the beginning of the story, the dwarves did not think Bilbo would come to much use, but during their adventure, every time the dwarves were in trouble, Bilbo used his wit and physical skills to save them. In the end, everybody loves Bilbo. I recommend this book because it is adventurous and captivates the imagination. Despite its length, it held my attention through vivid description and witty humor.